establish the kingdom of God on earth. It is great for the righteous, for it carries a new civilization on it, whereas the people don't visibly age and they don't get sick. There's new life, new vegetation and water, and it also has the technology to purify the earth after the removal of Satan. However, this plane is dreadful to the wicked, because according to the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, the presence of the will indicates an inevitable war that will take place between good and evil. For the mother plane carries 1,500 bomber planes inside of it. These are called baby planes, and each baby plane carries 3 bombs. The bombs are timed to drill into the earth for a mile and then explode, sending up a 1-mile-high mountain, destroying everything within 50 square miles. So Revelation 20:9 and 10 takes on a whole new meaning for us when it says, "But fire came down from heaven and devoured them, and the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet had been thrown." Now, to many people's surprise, the manufacturing and development of this highly advanced spacecraft did not come from outer space. The components, manufacturers, pilots, and intelligence associated with those so-called UFOs come from the best human minds and the best materials from the planet Earth. They are not green or gray people with big heads and huge eyes who deal with this mechanical planet. According to the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, the construction of these planes took place in the Nepalese islands of Japan and launched in 1929 after 20 years of manpower and some of the most systematic expertise used to complete it. There were 25,000 scientists involved in the construction of the wheel, and it cost $150 million in gold to construct. It's made from the toughest and finest steel not known to this world, and is the largest man-made object in the sky, measuring a 1/2 mile by a 1/2 mile. And I know you're wondering, now who is flying or piloting these wheels? The baby planes are piloted by men who have been taught and trained since the age of 6 under the guidance of Allah, God, in the person of Master Fard Muhammad. Those men or scientists who control the planes at the command of Master Fard Muhammad to execute his will. According to the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, these scientists are what scriptures call angels. Muhammad's representation of angels are more practical and not mystified like religion has done when speaking of angels. Angels are not spirits or figments with wings on their backs. The angels are real people who have access to special wisdom, resources, and capabilities that are not of this present world, far more advanced. Going back to Ezekiel's will prophecy, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad clarified the meaning of the 4 living creatures who inhabit Ezekiel's will. He says in his book, The Fall of America, Ezekiel saw great work going on in the wheel, and 4 living creatures, and their work was as it were in the middle of a wheel. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went with them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. The power of the lifting up of the 4 creatures was in the wheel. The 4 creatures represents the 4 colors of the original people of the earth: the black man, red man, brown man, and yellow man. These angels or men pilot these planes and know every location of America's military bases, plane hangars, and missile silos. For America is number 1 on the list to be destroyed for the evils done to her former slaves and the original people of the entire planet, and Europe is number 2 to be destroyed. Both America and Europe will be made examples for the rest of the world. The wheels travel from 9,000 to 25,000 miles per hour and can stay in outer space before it needs to refuel for 6 months to a year. It refuels by sucking up oxygen and hydrogen from the Earth's atmosphere. And I suggest you order this book if you want to know more about the mother wheel. I'll put the link in the description.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad started learning and teaching of this great wheel called the mother plane around 1932. 10 years later, in 1942, after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, The temple, as it was called at that time, was raided by law enforcement officials under the guidance of the FBI. He was questioned by the FBI on the drawing of the wheel and his writing about it that they had taken from the temple, and he explained to the government of the United States and to the FBI its aim and purpose, who made it, and why it is now above America. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said it was a masterpiece of mechanics and engineering, and that nothing like this has ever been seen before. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said it is the greatest military weapon ever developed in the annals of the history of Allah, God, and man in this universe. He said that the vision of this wheel was seen thousands of years before it came into being or became a reality. Some of the prophets were given the ability to envision it and were terrified and overcome by the majesty of such a dreadful weapon that was the greatest mechanical object ever made. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that this great wheel was made for military purposes, for it was to engage in the great battle in the sky that would end this world and usher in that world that the prophets exclaimed would come at the end of the 6,000-year rule of the enemy of Allah, God, and the enemy of the aboriginal people of the earth.
Outer space. The number of UFO sightings in Canada is soaring tenfold over the past 25 years.
Easy to think it's silly or it's just a bunch of hokum out there. But Senator Mark Warner, who is the vice chair of the Intelligence Committee, said, look, I think it's important. He told us just this afternoon, I think it's important that the military is taking this more seriously now than they did in the past.
The enigma puzzling Colorado and Nebraska law enforcement in more than a dozen counties. Witnesses say the drones typically appear after sunset, as many as 30 flying in formation, 200 to 300 feet above ground.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for respecting these teachings, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of NOI Beliefs 101.
Announcement.
So in calling this press conference, I'm calling you because of the serious nature of the announcement that I am about to make. An announcement on which hangs the future of this nation, its leaders, and the people of America. This is not the usual press conference, though I realize that you may only be able to use a very small portion of what I say if you choose to use it at all. However, I would hope that you record everything that I say, that it may bear a record either for or against you and me. It is written in the book of Ezekiel, when I say unto the wicked, you shall surely die, and you give him not warning, nor speak to warn the wicked from his wicked way, to save his life, the same wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at your hand. But if you warn the wicked, and he turn not from his wickedness, nor from his wicked way, he shall die in his iniquity, but you have delivered your soul. It is in this spirit that I make this announcement. In a tiny town in Mexico called Tepoztlan, there is a mountain on top of which is the ruins of a temple dedicated to Quetzalcoatl, the Christ figure of Central and South America. A mountain which I've climbed several times. However, on the night of September the 17th, 1985, I was carried up on that mountain in a vision with a few friends of mine. As we reached the top of the mountain, a wheel, or what you call an unidentified flying object, appeared at the side of the mountain, and I was called from the wheel to come up into the wheel. 3 metal legs appeared from the wheel, giving me the impression that it was going to land, but it never came over the mountain. Being somewhat afraid, I called to the members of my party to come with me, but a voice from the wheel spoke, saying, "Not them, just you." I was told to relax, and a beam of light came from the wheel, and I was carried up on this beam of light into the wheel. I sat next to the pilot. However, I could not see him. I could only feel his presence. As the wheel lifted off from the side of the mountain, moving at a terrific speed, I knew I was being transported to the mother wheel, or the mother plane, which is a human-built planet a half a mile by a half a mile, which the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us of for over 60 years. The pilot, knowing that I was fearful of seeing this great mechanical object in the sky, maneuvered his craft in such a way that I would not see the mother plane, and then backed quickly into it and docked in a tunnel. I was escorted by the pilot to a door and admitted into a room. I shall not bother you with a description of the room, but suffice it to say that at the center of the ceiling was a speaker, and through this speaker I heard the voice of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad speaking to me as clearly as you hear my voice this morning. He spoke in short, cryptic sentences, and as he spoke, a scroll full of cursive writing rolled down in front of my eyes, but it was a projection of what was being written in my mind. As I attempted to read the cursive writing, which was in English, the scroll disappeared, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad began to speak to me again. He said, and I quote, "President Reagan has met with the Joint Chiefs of Staff to plan a war. I want you to hold a press conference in Washington, D.C., and announce their plan and say to the world that you got the information from me on the wheel," end quote. He said to me that he would not permit me to see him at that time, but he said that I had one more thing to do, and when that one more thing was done, I could come again to the wheel, and I would be permitted to see him face to face. He then dismissed me, and I entered the small wheel, and the pilot, whom I still could not see, moved the craft out of the tunnel and took it up to a terrific height and maneuvered his craft that I might look down upon the mother wheel, and I saw a city in the sky. With great speed, it brought me back to Earth and dropped me off near Washington, where I then proceeded into this city to make the announcement. After I awakened from the vision, it seemed to vanish from my mind. However, on the morning of September the 19th, 1985, a great earthquake struck Mexico City, and it was felt as far away as Tepoztlan, the little town where I was staying. The earthquake brought the vision forcibly to my mind, and I spoke it later that morning for the first time to my wife, Khadija Muhammad, and to Sister Tainetta Muhammad in the city of Cuernavaca in Morelos, Mexico. During the vision of 1985, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did not tell me who the war was planned against or where the war would take place. But as events began to unfold from September to December of 1985 into January of 1986, it began to dawn on me slowly that that war might be against Muammar Gaddafi and the Libyan Jamahiriya, but I was not completely sure. In early February 1986, I was invited to participate in and be the spokesman at a press conference initiated by the Libyans in cooperation with Kwame Ture of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party and the representatives of approximately 15 groups of blacks, Native Americans, Hispanics, and whites, in essence, to say to the government of America, hands off Libya. While I was speaking at that press conference, the lights of the television cameras in the back of the room brought back the vision of the press conference that I was to hold in Washington, D.C., and I wondered to myself, could this be it? In February 1986, I embarked on a world tour. And while I was in Ghana, in West Africa, it crystallized for me that the war that President Reagan and the Joint Chiefs of Staff had planned was, in fact, against Muammar Gaddafi and the people of Libya. So I decided to alter my planned itinerary to go to Libya and to warn Muammar Gaddafi. I arrived in Libya and practically every member of the Libyan government met me in my suite, with the exception of Muammar Gaddafi and his second-in-command, Jaloud. I spoke to them and they went speedily away from my room. I expect they went to see Muammar Gaddafi. But from Tripoli, speaking before the representatives of approximately 80 nations, I repeated this vision publicly, sending back to the United States a warning to President Reagan and then Secretary of State George Shultz. During the confrontation in the Gulf of Sidra between the United States Air Force and the Libyan Air Force, it was reported in the press that a bright orange object was seen over the Mediterranean. The wheel was in fact present, and it interfered with the highly sensitive electronic equipment of the aircraft carrier that was in the Gulf of Sidra, forcing it to return to Florida for repairs. In 1987, 2 years later, in the New York Times Sunday magazine and on the front page of the Atlanta Constitution, the truth of my vision was verified, for the headlines of the Atlanta Constitution read, President Reagan planned a war against Libya. In the article which followed, the exact words that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad spoke to me from the wheel were found, that the President had met with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and planned a war against Libya in the early part of September 1985. I did not realize at that time, when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that I had one more thing to do, that that one more thing involved having the actual press conference that I'm holding today and making the actual announcement that I am now fully in the knowledge and understanding of. The reason that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did not tell me who the President and the Joint Chiefs of Staff had planned the war against was because Muammar Gaddafi, the Muslim revolutionary leader, and the small nation of Libya was only to serve as a sign of an even more significant and consequential event which was to come several years later. I am here to announce today that President Bush has met with his Joint Chiefs of Staff under the direction of General Colin Powell to plan a war against the black people of America, the Nation of Islam, and Louis Farrakhan, with particular emphasis on our black youth under the guise of a war against drug sellers, drug users, gangs, and violence. All of this is going on under the heading of extremely urgent national security. The FBI, in preparation for this assault on the black community, has stepped up its campaign against strong black political leadership. The FBI is using dirty tactics under the guise of flushing out corrupt politicians to malign and besmirch the good name of many of our strong fighters for justice, threatening them with indictments or casting them into prison. With other weaker leaders, the government has already promised them wealth and nearness to the centers of power, and to be in their councils in exchange for their being silent when the actual attack comes. The FBI has been working to destroy the Nation of Islam since 1940. Right. As a young Muslim 34 years ago, I recall that agents of the FBI were constantly visiting members of the Nation of Islam, trying to frighten us and our families away from our belief in the religion of Islam and away from our desire to follow the leadership of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now it is well documented through the Senate subcommittee hearings on the counterintelligence program of the United States government under J. Edgar Hoover, and through information that we have received under the Freedom of Information Act, that the government of the United States, the Justice Department, and the FBI, in the name of fighting communism and in the name of preventing a Messiah from rising among black people who would unite us, and in the name of protecting the existing social and political order, use taxpayers' dollars to employ every dirty trick that was ever used in overthrowing foreign governments deemed to be the enemies of the United States, to overthrow and to undermine all black leaders and black organizations in the United States. It is well documented that the FBI, using taxpayers' dollars, conducted illegal surveillance, wiretaps, and mischievous machinations against black leadership to discredit, undermine, embarrass, and even kill those leaders who stood up to amend the condition that 310 years of chattel slavery and 100 years of free slavery produced. That which the FBI has done against the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam, black leaders, and black organizations, again, is well documented. It was the FBI who planned and engineered the split between Malcolm X and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. It was the FBI and its agents that engineered the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. It was the FBI and its agents that engineered the destruction of the Panther Party and the killing of members in the Panther Party. It was the FBI and its agents that engineered the destruction of the Nation of Islam after the departure of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in 1975. It was the FBI that planned and engineered the struggle in the courts to weaken the nation from within and to deprive the Muslims of that which their hard-earned dollars had gained in property through probate court disputes. it was the FBI's plan to promote division among the ministers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad after his departure, that the Nation of Islam would never ever rise again. And now that I and those with me are working night and day to rebuild the work of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as a means of reforming our people and transforming their lives into lives of service and usefulness to themselves and others. The same fear of the government that was seen in times past when Dr. Martin Luther King made an innocuous, simple speech saying, "I have a dream." The next day, the FBI said he was the most dangerous black man in America, not because he was actually dangerous, but because he was wielding influence over black people that white people did not want him to wield. My dear beloved brothers and sisters, the fear of the government that was seen in times past is now seen again because of Louis Farrakhan's growing popularity and influence among black people in America and throughout the world. And now members of the FBI's anti-terrorist task force and the organized crime racketeering task force have been working night and day to cripple and destroy the Nation of Islam, culminating in an attack on Louis Farrakhan with the purpose of discrediting, embarrassing, and ultimately causing my death, preferably by heightening tensions within the movement, exacerbated by government agents posing as Muslims. This is the aim. This is the aim of the United States government, and it is also the aim of the President of the United States, President George Bush. 2 weeks before George Bush was elected president, he made a speech before the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles detailing his support of Israel and his continued support of the Jewish community. He pledged continued funding of the Justice Department in their continuing investigation and vigorous prosecution of whom the president called anti-Semites. And he said, quote, "Whether they wear brown shirts or white shirts and bow ties, whether they live in Skokie, Chicago, or Brooklyn, New York, the villain is the same," end quote. I'm sure President Bush was not referring to Senator Paul Simon of Illinois, who wears bow ties and white shirts. But during the Reagan administration, the then Vice President Bush spoke out against me, identifying me by name. And now as he approached the presidency, he spoke of me by innuendo, saying that he would continue the funding of the Justice Department. He promised he would lead the fight against those whom he and certain leading members of the Jewish community determined to be anti-Semites through vigorous investigation, prosecution. And then he indirectly referred to me as the villain, quote unquote. Evidence is now mounting that those were not empty words of the president, but those words, as in the past, have been translated into a program, a policy, and a war that has been designed to destroy the Nation of Islam and Minister Farrakhan, with a particular focus on the growing strength of black youth. The vision that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave me from the wheel in 1985 is now manifested fully in that President Bush has met with his Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chairman of which is a black man, General Colin Powell, and again, they too have planned a war. Why would President Bush assign a black man to be chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, jumping over 30 white men who are reportedly more qualified to be chairman? Oftentimes, when a black man is elevated to a high position, it is because of a desire to use him against the legitimate aspirations of his own people, or to use him as window dressing to make the masses of black people believe that an unjust and corrupt system is now working in their behalf. With an army full of young black men and women, and an army full of Native Americans, Hispanics, and poor whites. Could it be that general power will be used to justify the use of these soldiers against General Noriega and his regime in Panama, against the Medellin drug cartel in South America, and then on to Daniel Ortega and the Sandinista regime, and possibly against Cuba, against the liberation movements in Africa, and lastly, but most importantly, against the rise of black youth and black people in America? Members of the press and brothers and sisters, for the past few years, the American press has been feeding the public the image of black youth on a rampage. From the gangs called Crips and Bloods in Los Angeles, California, the Central Park incident, to the drug sellers that are operating in major cities along the East Coast, particularly in Washington, D.C., the image that the American public gets is that when it comes to gangs, violence, and drugs, that the gang leaders are black, the violence is black, the drug sellers are black, and the majority of drug users are black. Our youth are being portrayed as perpetrators of violence and are being armed with street sweepers, AK-47s, Uzis, MAC-10s, and it is being reported that these black youth are better armed than the local police. The police are saying that they have insufficient arms to combat these drug groups, and therefore they either need heavier weapons or the backup of the National Guard and federal troops. However, information has come to us that the police have great firepower available to them. Information has come to us that in Fort Hood, Texas, black men and women are training supposedly to fight in house-to-house combat to protect European citizens and European cities, while in reality they don't know it yet. They're being trained for house-to-house combat in the ghettos of North America. Brothers and sisters, information has come to us that certain areas of the country have been targeted to test these new weapons. Armored personnel carriers that can travel at speeds up to 70 miles per hour with high-caliber machine guns are being stored in the armories of the major cities and are stored in the armory right here in Washington, D.C. And the use of certain kinds of gases is being planned. This is being planned to be executed against black youth in several major cities in the country, and one of those cities is Washington, D.C. My dear, beloved brothers and sisters, much of the gang activity is fomented, manipulated, and kept alive by forces from within the white community, and oftentimes by the very police themselves, to justify what the government is planning against our community. I've talked with the gang leaders, and they have told me how the police will come into the community and say, the Bloods are going to ride tonight, what are you going to do? Then they'll go into the Crips community and say to the Crips, the Bloods are going to ride on you tonight, what are you going to do? Police have actually picked up Crips and dropped them off in the neighborhood of the Bloods and say, when I leave and turn my back, you can do to them whatsoever you please. These are police fomenting more and more bloodshed so that every night on the news, this media can show black youth with their arms behind their back, kneeling down, so that the white American public can see black youth as the enemy, so that when the government moves on black people, Americans will applaud and say, you did a good job. All of this has been planned and is now being carried out under the pretext of national security and to maintain, preserve, and protect an increasingly corrupt and unjust social and political order. In closing, I would like to issue a warning to the president, a warning to the government, and a warning
to the people of the United States of America, if I am in your mind before you of myself, if I am in your mind a hater, an anti-Semite, a wild-eyed radical, then you have nothing to fear from my presence. For I, like those who are actually like that, will go the way that history has decreed for that kind of person. However, if I am in reality in front of you by Allah's divine will, as an extension of the divine warnings given to you from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, then be instructed that you would do well to leave me alone. You would do well. You would do well to leave the Nation of Islam alone and to cease and desist from your evil planning against the future of the black people of America and the world. For the black people of America, though despised and rejected, have now become the people of God, and He has declared that He will fight you for their liberation. The government would be wise to heed the counsel of Gamaliel in the days of Paul and the early Christians, who advised the rulers of that day with these words, quote, "And so in the present case I say to you, stay away from these men and let them alone, for if this plan or action..."
Hands off Farrakhan. Hands off the Nation of Islam. Hands off black people in America. Hands off the darker people in America. Hands off, because there is a divine judgment that is on America. Yes, divine judgment. You can take it or you can leave it alone, but there's a divine judgment on America. And one of the biggest problems that we have, at least the government has, is black people in America. That's the biggest problem that is going on in America right now. What are we going to do with these black people in America? We did everything to try to kill them and try to get rid of them. We just can't do it. They say within 20 years from now, the population of white people will be dying. So what is the solution? Well, I'll let you figure that out. But hands off Farrakhan, hands off the Nation of Islam, hands off the black people of America and the darker people of America. Hands off. I like to play a part. First, I like to give my announcement to the world that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan just gave a gathering. It was a concert premiere, world premiere, where in fact he was playing the violin. It was beautiful. He just did this on the 11th of May on his birthday. He just turned 88 years of age. 88, can you believe that? All praise is due to Allah. So we're going to play that, and that's going to take us right on off. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to us. I want to shout out to the FOI, to the brothers, the believers, and to the MGTs, and to Black Male Community Council of Philadelphia, and to all the organizations trying to bring some type of resolution to the problems here in America. I give my hats off to you. So with that, we're going to play the minister. He stood up. He did not sit down. He played. He did his thing. So with that, I end it with this concert he did on his birthday. Happy anniversary to you, Minister Louis Farrakhan. 88 years of age. Good health. Healthy to live. So long. Thank you. Let's listen to our minister before we close out. Thank you again. Assalamu alaikum.
Jefferson Health offers no-cost COVID-19 testing sites at St. Raymond of Pinafore Church. Testing is on Thursdays and Saturdays. A second testing location has been added at